Hi, I'm Pat Halpin, and welcome to this special edition of Meet the Leaders, coming to you from our state's capital in Albany. We had a chance to sit down with members of the state Senate and Assembly to discuss the most important issues that lie ahead. So stay with us. Meet the Leaders starts right now. Welcome back to this special edition of Meet the Leaders here in Albany at the Governor's State of the State Address. So we've been joined by New York State Senator Ken Panna from the 6th Senatorial District in Nassau County.
Right.
You know, Senator, 4 years ago when this governor took office, he laid out a very ambitious program to redesign how Medicare is delivered, the health care, for the poor. Actually, I have two questions for you about this. First of all, how is that redesign working?
Okay, well, in two ways.
And second is it saving the money that the state had anticipated?
The money is being saved. In fact, the conversation, now we're starting out here, the beginning of the legislative session, the beginning of January, we haven't seen the budget, that'll be another 2 weeks down the road. But the conversation has been, the hints from the Medicaid director of the state have been, we're going to try to give some of that money back to the healthcare providers.
In what way?
Now that's the open question. We even may have the counties saying, well, maybe you could give it back to us too, because we're providing 10 to 20% of the contribution, and that's a big mandate. Right. So that's a whole debate. It's going to go on. But when the governor started 4 years ago, it was not only we need a better way of running Medicaid, but also how can we save money, because the state was $9 billion in deficit.
So but for years, you and others, and the New York Times had done a big story that said the Medicaid costs in New York State are just way out of control, growing at double digits every year, and with no end in sight. So there needed to be this big fix.
Well, there was a gradual movement. The Senate issued a report, 2003, says we have to do a lot more to unify Medicaid, make sure the administration of it is much better than it is. It's integrated so that the Medicaid that's mental health is with the Medicaid that's physical health. Right. And that started moving along. Pataki started it, didn't finish it, but Spitzer got in, and not much attention was paid to it, though I must say they did some very good work, but then we hit the fiscal crisis and everything got lost.
Right.
Cuomo gets in, says we got to do a better job, and everything has to go through managed care. The mantra has been a managed care. Now, we had it for physical health general, but you're talking about drugs, you're talking about mental illness, behavioral, you're even talking about developmentally disabled, and try to get everything in some type of managed care. So government's not doing the direct oversight, someone else is being the care manager.
And the consequence of that is what?
Well, you have a global cap, and then you have a 10-year rolling average cap, and then you have a 2-year cap. There's more caps because there have been more built-in cost of living to Medicaid than you can shake a stick at.
Right.
So it has started to work that allows for growth, about 3.5%, 4% a year, and we've actually brought it in under that for this year. Yet, we're talking about hundreds of millions of an increase because the entire Medicaid budget's $54 billion.
Which is a combination of state
federal, local.
And some local dollars as well. But then when you roll that in with the Affordable Care Act, otherwise known as Obamacare, where there was this big expansion of Medicaid, although New York had led that.
We were almost there.
You were almost there to begin with. But now the difference is the feds are paying 90% of that
for
increase.
the expansion population
right.
for a few years.
Right.
So ultimately that tends to go away. That was intended to be a big carrot for all the states, and New York gets a little bit of the benefit. But we're also got the benefit of the federal government giving a huge amount of grants to start the exchange that New York is running now.
So how is that all coming together? Now, one of the other big cost drivers, and I want to get this on the table, is that the cost of nursing home care. Does that fall under this managed care approach as well?
They're trying to, but frankly, it's a lot different in terms of managed care than it is if you're running a hospital. A hospital, there's only so many, and you can say there's a certain point in the economic landscape that hospitals can dictate. and then you also can say there's certain economies of how you practice medicine in hospitals that you can save money. Nursing home, it's residential care mainly, it's a little bit of medical care, but there's a lot of them. So how do you manage in there? It's a goal that they have, but it's not nearly approached yet.
Okay. So thinking about this 4 years later, and you're now 2014, the state has gone from big deficit of $10 billion to what's reported to be a $2 billion surplus. A lot of that came by controlling costs in places like Medicaid. As you think about that, how do you put this in context for 14 and then going forward? What does that look like as we think about the trends?
Well, the biggest challenge, no matter what any politician would like to tell you, is that it's not doctors or hospitals out of control or patients. It's the fact that the population is aging. It's getting to be over 65. The baby boomers are a couple of years over 65. And when you get older, you need health care more. And that pressure is incredible. And that's going to continue. So whether or not experiments of how you realign the delivery of services or do it more efficiently, you're still going to face this baby boomer pressure. That's going to be a tough challenge. It's a tough challenge for pensions as well as for health care.
Now, you're an expert on the New York State, if you will, healthcare system. I'm talking about public and private as well as everything in between. Is New York State ahead of where other states hope to be? Where do we fit as other states grapple with the very same issue you just mentioned?
Sometimes we're ahead of it, sometimes we're behind. We have a commissioner of health who'll say, yeah, but we only rank and name some poor ranking when it comes to maybe dealing with heart disease or maybe dealing with infant births. It all is in relation to one another. The Department of Health, Commissioner Shaw, has actually said we should do a prevention health agenda. He's taken that agenda all on his own, and it's a pretty good agenda, wrapped it into how counties deliver health services, into hospitals deliver health services, and called for report cards in each, and say we need to move ahead with that. And so that you're going to have to generalize, because actually Obamacare, which has taken effect, has a lot of prevention medicine that's free. It's built into the cost of health insurance wherever you get it. So it's costing somebody something. But for the average person who's you or I wanting to get an annual checkup, it's there. Same thing for the women who want to get a mammogram or anything like that. It's there. It does not cost them anything. What we need to do is organize that benefit so people know it's there, know how to access it, and then if there's need for follow-up care, figure out how to pay for that.
All right, Senator, I'm being told we have to cut, but I have to ask you, yes or no, are you in favor of medical marijuana?
Well, the governor's preempted it. He's going to implement it. He's prevented gridlock because you got the left saying we really want to have it like Colorado, free for everybody, and on the right saying we don't want to deal with drugs. So the governor is driven right down the middle, and we're not going to be dealing with it.
And we'll see how that works out. Senator Kev Hanna, thanks so much for being here with us. One of the experts on healthcare in this state. We'll have more from Albany in just a moment, so please stay with us. We've been joined by New York State Assemblyman Stephen Engelbright from the 4th Assembly District in Suffolk County. And Assemblyman, you represent a district that has a lot of teachers in it. You've got one of the greatest universities in America in your district, Stony Brook University. And this year, governor's reported we're going to have a surplus of about $2 billion, and he's talked about a variety of targeted tax cuts and all that. How do you think funds like that ought to be invested? I mean, at the end, if you're going to give a tax cut, that's a decision to invest that money by giving it back, or if you want to put it in education, that's a decision.
Right.
How should, because we've just gone through a period, 4 years ago he took off, it was a $10 billion shortfall, so it's been a remarkable recovery.
Right. Well, let's start with the public schools.
Yeah.
The public schools over the last 4 years have basically been spending their rainy day funds, and they're down to the bone. So
To keep taxes down.
To keep taxes down. It was a necessary thing when there was a deficit. Not that we don't have a deficit. We still have a rolling deficit year to year. but we also have a surplus. And so the real question is, now that we have some discretionary dollars, should we begin to fill the need that the schools have in order to maintain their excellence? And I believe that the answer is yes, we should do that. And I didn't hear that today. The governor did mention the schools. He spoke of investing into hardware for the schools, and he talked about investing into an incentive for really terrific teachers. I have a little bit of problem with some of this because I really believe most of our teachers are pretty terrific. They are almost uniformly working their tails off.
You know, it's interesting. So you're an educator. You've been a university professor for some time, so you have an appreciation of what that job takes. But at the end of the day, hardware and software, all that stuff are tools.
Right.
But it's not a substitute for a high-quality instructor in front of that classroom.
Correct. And it's not a substitute for having schools that can offer some sense of predictability for a positive work environment.
So you would like to see part of this money invested in aid directly to our school districts,
Yes.
which do two things. It's about education. It also helps hold down taxes.
And also into higher ed.
And talk to me about higher ed. You know, the legislature, governor came together for this plan called SUNY 2020.
Right.
And just describe what the elements are, because I want to follow up after you go through that description.
The 2020 plan drives state money into the state university system. It enables new professorships. At Stony Brook, it would be about 270 new academic personnel. That is the essence of what will provide for the next generation of the workforce and the researchers who generate ideas and inventions that enable our economy. So it was a really good thing. The governor played a very important role, working closely with the Chancellor Zimfer and the university presidents, particularly my university president at Stony Brook, Sam Stanley. So we've started to hire. Stony Brook has added something on the order of about 180 to 200 positions, and that is going to be very meaningful for the university.
But part of that, to pay for that, was that the universities would get more autonomy. They'd be able
Right.
to increase tuition some. You
Yes.
wouldn't see these dramatic increases all
Right.
at once, but some.
But paced out.
And the state would not, at a minimum, decrease state aid to those universities. So whether
Right.
you raise it on the students
Right.
because you'll support
Right.
universities less, and give the universities the flexibility that you
Right.
just talked about to make the strategic investments. But that doesn't mean that the state shouldn't be investing more in those
That's right.
universities. That's a floor, is it?
And in fact, what we may be looking at, of course, we haven't seen the budget,
Right.
but there wasn't a lot of discussion in the State of the State message today about higher ed. The governor mentioned it. One of his slides showed the 2020 groundbreaking at Stony Brook. But my concern is that there may not be money in the budget for the negotiated salary increments. Those negotiations with the UUP, United University Professions, need to be paid for. It was negotiated by the administration, and I certainly hope that the money is in the budget. If it isn't, what will happen is that the premise of hiring and moving forward will be subtracted from it. We're going to lose our ability to fully make fully robust the faculty at the campus.
No, and you raise an interesting point. Those raises and increases, whatever they end up being,
about $6 million a year.
Okay, yeah,
Just at Stony Brook.
That's real
About
money.
41 million statewide.
Statewide, and those are negotiated by the governor's office,
Right.
and by the SUNY system, not by the local university president.
And so if it's not in the budget, it will fall to the legislature
Right.
to fight for
to put the money
the
in.
restoration.
All right. Well, I know. Look, it's an interesting time. Big changes in the last 4 years for the better, but there's still big challenges
Big
facing
challenges
New York.
that face us all. But the governor called for us to work together. I think that was the most positive part of his entire message.
Okay.
So we'll see what we can do.
All right, Steve, thanks so much for being here.
Thank you, Pat.
We really appreciate
Pleasure
it.
to
Sit
see you.
tight. We're going to take a short break. We'll be back in a minute for more with Albany. Welcome back to this special edition of Meet the Leaders, here with New York State Assemblyman Chuck Levine. Assemblyman, you just heard from the governor. As most governors do, they lay out their plans in the State of the State address, but this also happens to be an election year for this governor. So I want to ask you the big question, which is just how is the state doing in 2014, 4 years after Andrew Cuomo has taken office?
Well, thanks to an economy that is doing infinitely better than it was 4 years ago when he took office, we're doing pretty darn well. And if we weren't doing pretty darn well, I don't think that the governor would be able to advance some of the programs that he's advancing, which are going to mean a loss in certain revenues.
But just to remind people, you looked at 4 years ago, the governor got up to be at a $10 billion deficit.
Yes.
He said, we have to control costs. And the state legislature and this governor took on some big sacred cows, like the spiraling cost of Medicaid, for example.
Well, the choice was take on those sacred cattle or keep getting the state in worse and worse financial condition. So the steps that were taken have helped. They've not been easy steps, but they have helped. And now we're in a position where our state finances have stabilized, our revenue has stabilized. And for example, one of the things he's talking about here is relaxing business taxes, corporate taxes, for businesses that will move into upstate New York. Now this is a very, very interesting subject because of course, those of us on Long Island and those of us in the metropolitan region are not going to be able to take advantage of that sort of a program.
So
However,
these are targeted tax cuts for
very
upstate New York,
targeted
yes.
tax cuts, but whatever can be done to help to bring upstate's economy back, which is a tremendous draw on the economies of the metropolitan region and Long Island, Nassau, and Suffolk.
Mm-hmm.
You know, a lot of the taxes that we pay that go to the state treasury end up subsidizing upstate New York because its economy has been so ravaged over the years.
But typically what happens when those proposals are put out there, everybody says, oh yeah, it makes sense. But then when it gets down to the nitty-gritty of a budget and changing the tax code and doing all this stuff, people say, okay, like what's in it for my area? Yes, I know Long Island's got a much lower unemployment rate. Yes, I know the economy is growing. Yes, I know that, but we still pay too much and we
Pat,
don't want.
I am shocked.
So
shocked to learn that politicians will act that way. Of course, it's all part of the give and take, and it's part of the balance, and it's part of the compromise that eventually will result in some legislation that will help to keep our state moving in the right direction. And I think most New Yorkers believe sincerely that New York is moving in the right direction, and that's a combination of several factors. One is a national economy which is improving, but our New York State economy has led the national economy in terms of getting better, and it also has to do with these programs and proposals by a governor who likes to get in there and mix it up and challenge, and has done a very darn good job, in my opinion.
Well, you and I both know that leadership starts at the top. And if you have a governor that isn't as engaged, even on things that he wants to see happen, they don't happen. Now, on the other hand, when the governor is too engaged, and this governor is very engaged, then you get pushback. Oh, he's putting pressure on me. So has the governor, after 4 years, been able to strike the appropriate balance where he calls you up, Assemblyman Levine, I need your help on this, or other members of the state legislature, and they look at it as an opportunity to work with the governor, or the point where, Governor, why are you strong-arming me? No, that's my words, not yours.
Just to set the record straight,
Okay.
I have yet to be strong-armed by this governor, or any governor for that matter, and I've been by and large a supporter of the economic programs that he has advanced. And I would have to say, though, that commenting on your remarks about the state of the state, this is the 10th time that I have listened to a governor's state of the state. And the first couple were very, very different if we contrast them with the sort of major programmatic presentation that Governor Cuomo has presented here today. The time was a governor would stand up, and they used to stand up in the chamber, in the assembly chamber, and would advance 3 or 4 or 5 separate areas for accomplishment or proposed accomplishment. And today, Governor Cuomo, as he has in previous years, is advancing literally dozens of separate economic and programmatic and policy changes which cover the economy, which cover criminal law, which cover, for example, not decriminalization, but legalization of marijuana for those who are in need in the 20 hospitals or so throughout the state. So it's a much more ambitious type of proposition these days than it has been.
So you're going to be busy.
Well, I like to stay busy, and this governor keeps us quite busy, as does the Speaker of the State Assembly.
And right, you're right. So it's an exciting time to be back to work here, and you've got an ambitious agenda. I wish you all the best.
Thank you, Pat.
And as you mentioned at the beginning, this is a much different day than it was 4 years ago.
It is. There's no question about it. It's hard to imagine, but 4 years ago, economic predictors, some economic predictors, were telling us we're at the edge of another Great Depression. The Wall Street Journal front pages told us that. It's much better to be here when we have a little more money to work with, and we can do some things that will really help the people of the state of New York.
As Franklin Roosevelt said, a rising tide lifts all ships. Now we just got to make sure that tide is rising as high as we hope it will.
Let's
all
hope
right,
so.
Assemblyman, thanks so much for being here with us.
You,
we
Pat.
really appreciate it. Thank you for watching this edition of Meet the Leaders. We'll be back in just a moment. Welcome back to the special edition of Meet the Leaders here in Albany for the Governor's State of the State address here at the beginning of January. We've been joined by Nassau County Comptroller George Maragos. And Comptroller Maragos, you've been on this show a lot, and we're going to see you again for a more extended interview. But I'm curious, you've come here every year that you have been Comptroller. And my question is, why? I mean, and I want to context that in all fairness. The state of New York and counties actually have a very important partnership if you look at how services are delivered. So what goes on in Albany has a big effect on counties like Nassau County.
Absolutely, Pat. Well, thank you for having me for
pleasure.
4 consecutive years.
My pleasure.
And a Happy New Year to you and your audience.
Thank you very much.
But yes, as goes the state, goes the various counties. I think Nassau County has somewhat differentiated itself from the rest of the state. As you may know, we have achieved the lowest unemployment rate of any county in the state. Now we're down to 5.1%.
Which people say is as close to full employment as you might get, but
That's
especially given this horrible recession that the entire nation went through, and Nassau, Long Island wasn't immune from that. That's a
remarkable achievement that we're very proud of. And secondly, we're no longer the highest tax county in the country. We've lost that dubious distinction, and that's another remarkable achievement by holding the line on property taxes.
But the county did that with the county taxes. But this governor, actually with the strong endorsement of yourself and the Republican County Executive, put in a tax cap that had a lot of local government officials and school officials pretty upset.
That's right, but we went one step further. Actually, we did not take advantage of the tax cap. We actually did not increase property taxes for 4 consecutive years. Now, how's that possible? A lot of people are wondering.
And the answer is?
Well, it's possible because we